Welcome, viewers, to this amazing episode. I cannot wait to record this because two of my favorite people are on this episode. It's Dipti and Roy, both from Microsoft. I will let them introduce themselves, but the community does not need an introduction, to be honest, because they are both such icons. Anytime I have a problem, I'm stuck with some new release. I go to them and they help me unravel and give me information that is super valuable for me. So excited, Dipti and Roy, for the fact
I'll let
that
Dipti go first.
thank you.
Sure. Short intro, Dipti Borkar, responsible for Microsoft OneLake and the strategic ISVs as part of Azure Data leadership team, but been in data a long time and done many different things from relational to non-relational to NoSQL to disaggregated stack and Hadoop and lakehouses, and continuing now into the AI first era for data. So exciting times. Roy?
Awesome. So I'm excited to be working for Dipti at Microsoft. My resume doesn't stack up to that, but I do have a lot of experience in product building in the data space. Been very vocal online as well about open table formats and kind of the next generation of data architecture. So just excited about the conversation. I know we had, two or three different events going on. So looking to talk to that, see what new technology comes out that we can chat about.
I have
Yeah,
to.
looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I have to say, when you both joined Microsoft, I asked you both individually, Why are you joining Microsoft?" Because I've seen you both in very entrepreneurial manner and smaller companies moving very fast. And I was actually quite amazed to hear from both of you that the work you're doing at Microsoft, building the Microsoft Fabric OneLake infrastructure, is like working for a startup, and you have the autonomy to pick the choose the direction and build the product out. So that was very unique. I like that approach you shared with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to have your cake and eat it too, right? So, although every opportunity, every company, every job for that matter has its pros and cons. In data, you need partners in crime, and so Roy and I and others, are partners in crime in making data continue to shine, and honestly, at the end of the day, get outcomes for our customers.
Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, honestly, it was the leadership. Deepti, Arun, Amir, the team that's kind of running Fabric and OneLake, and just the strategy and the ability to like execute quickly and move such a large ship in the right direction was really, really exciting, right? Because like in a small company, in a small startup, like you can quickly move around, but doing that at a large company is really, really impressive. And the fact that Microsoft put so much trust in Fabric and the leadership team of Fabric really made the big difference for me to say like this is going to be successful. We're going to be successful together. So it's a rocket ship. I keep saying it's like AWS was 10, 12 years ago. Now we're doing it here. So I'm excited about it.
I'm curious, both of you are constantly in touch with customers. Dipti, let me start with you because I know you talk to a lot of people constantly. Are you witnessing that customer needs are changing? And if so, what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always constant change, right? But I think given the AI era that we're in, it's driving a lot of different things. I mean, what hasn't changed is data continues to be important. Organizationally, though, right, and the stack, the tech stack, right, there are changes. And what I'm seeing is that AI and data teams are consolidating, and increasingly data engineers are now just becoming AI engineers. It's like a new name, but fundamentally a lot, at the core is the same. We'll also see, sizes of data teams getting smaller over time. Data lakes are actually becoming even more important. I mean, I've been in this space from the early days of data lakes. And because of the AI use cases, I think that single view of the data estate is even more important than it was. And so, wherever that data might be, right? Might be a different cloud, it might be on-prem, it might be in various different systems. And so this consolidation means a consolidated stack as well. And Roy probably has perspectives as well. Roy, over to you.
Yeah, so I would start by saying that I don't think fundamentally customer requirements are changing.
That's
I
good.
think for
Yeah.
the most
Thank you.
part, they're the same, right?
Yeah.
Companies want insight into
Mhm.
business, product, customers, et cetera, et cetera. They want to be able to act on it quick and actually compete in the market by offering more value to their customers, whatever the value is, right? Personalization, et cetera, et cetera. I think what is changing is the pace, right? The speed at which companies have to react in order to stay competitive, right? And because of that, they're looking for a lot of different ways to solve that problem. And now with the economy and all the kind of like conserving money and being fiscally responsible, like how can you do more with less? Keeps coming kind of rising up to the surface in different words, right? So when you really listen intently to what customers are saying, like I want ChatGPT, I want AI, I want to auto generate this, like that's all saying I want to do more with less. So it's really about offering, as Deepti said, like offering that data foundation for companies to be able to say, now we have this standard foundation across the organization. You can plug in different tools to do different things to drive different parts of your business faster. And because these things are changing so quickly, today it's one tool, tomorrow is going to be a different tool. But how do you have a standard, consistent layer that you don't have to keep changing your
Yeah.
data every time you bring a different tool, right? Which is why open table formats and kind of what we're talking about in the past is really, really important because if you don't build that standard foundation, you're just going to have to rebuild and recreate and migrate over and over and over again every time you want to use a different tool that at the end of the day drives the same value for the
So
business.
it's interesting. If I'm hearing both of you, you're saying basically you're completely aligned here because you're saying consolidation of your data stack, but then with customers having control over how they want to use the data. And then Dipti, you said the data could be anywhere. It could be on-prem, it could be in the cloud, multiple cloud providers, it could be on the edge. So, and then it's structured, unstructured, like all kinds of data. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing a mix of everything. I mean, I would say structured is sort of the core, right? You always start off with structured.
Mm.
There's obviously a lot of best practices there, but unstructured is increasingly becoming important because of agents, because of models, and being able
Yeah.
to now very efficiently and
Mhm.
effectively get parts of that information out, whether it's extracting it and putting it into metadata and storing it, right, or transforming it on the way into some other form. And we'll probably talk a little bit about this. But yeah, structured, unstructured, everything in the middle. The formats,
Yeah.
I think everything ends up being either open, in open formats, either Delta or Iceberg, and increasingly. But all of these are now kind of being consolidated into the same system because at the end of the day, customers don't want different APIs or different approaches to get it
Mm.
out, right? They want the same approach, the same sort of concepts. We used to be, API
Right.
first.
Yeah.
It was client server architecture years and years ago. It's API first. It'll move to agent first, MCP first, and so the way you extract it might have changed, right, in terms of the getting that insight. But at the core foundation, you still need the same data management techniques for the speed, for the scale, and for the efficiency.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you so much for setting that foundation. This summer, I saw you at a number of different events. Both of you. So I went to Build. I went Microsoft Build, Snowflake Summit, Database Data and AI Summit. Were you struck by some common theme that you're seeing across all of these? I'm just curious. Like, what is one thing that different vendors, but the message is the same? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start off by saying there is so much energy in this space,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I've been in data 20 plus years, but it's never been a dull day, but it's just getting more exciting because of this confluence of all of these things coming in, right?
Yeah.
There, in terms of the core patterns, there were, there are a few that I'd probably call out. As we said, AI dominant theme. You have to talk about AI, but OLTP consolidating with analytics was another one that started to come up with Postgres and getting added into the systems. We obviously had our amazing, Postgres on Azure. And for Gen AI apps, those are, becoming really important to consolidate these. We've talked about HTAP or,
Mhm.
all of these things. Really, we're starting to see a foundational change there. But, from a fabric perspective, I would say that a lot of this was part of the vision, right? Multiple engines, right? Whether it's, and in our case, just a range because we just have to deal with multiple engines, whether they're partners or, just internally at Microsoft. And this consolidation of analytics and operational, we have SQL that's part of Fabric. Cosmos DB just announced last week. Now public review is now there, so Cosmos DB is part of Fabric. So really, that those stacks are coalescing. The foundation hasn't changed, but hopefully, it's getting a lot easier for customers so that time to market gets shortened, as Roy was
Mhm.
talking about earlier. And of course, we integrate with both Snowflake and Azure Databricks, right? With OneLake as that foundation, we have Iceberg that you can read and write Snowflake and directly write into OneLake. Azure Databricks announced the mirroring last week as well, and so there's a lot of interop that's also going on because it's really going to be multiple engines, whether they're all Microsoft engines or others.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, after you, please go ahead.
I was gonna just kind of back to what Dipti said. I think it's 100% accurate. I think if you sort of take go up a level, right? Consolidation around several core data and AI clouds is really what you're seeing. You're
Mhm.
seeing a lot of these Databricks, Snowflake, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, sort of like creating these data and AI clouds that offer OLTP, OLAP, machine learning, LLM training, kind of like everything that you need to deliver value quickly to your customers in a single cloud. I think eliminating a lot of the complexity of interconnection and interoperability, and yes, bring your own tool, but within the ecosystem of this data cloud that actually makes it easier. And I think that talks to a couple different things, right? So the first one I already said, where we're standardizing on a storage. So Deepti said about how in OneLake we're actually reaching out into other data clouds and we're connecting. We're not seeing that a lot in the market. We're definitely seeing it with
Mhm.
OneLake doing that, but I think it's going to be more and more in the future to kind of let customers connect across cloud, across on-prem, across different data environments, Databricks and Snowflakes and Fabric working together because ultimately it's the data. How do you get the data into the higher compute layers? The other thing on the compute layer is that all these clouds are just offering everything, right? Whether it's Postgres or Spark or Trino, it doesn't really matter, right? You can run OLAP, OLTP. The engine on the covers matters less and less. It's more for us, technologists who love to talk about the differences
Yeah.
between them, but for the customer,
Yeah.
usually doesn't make much of a difference. But I think the piece that really, for me, really resonate, I think is going to get much bigger is the app layer, right?
Mhm.
Snowflake tried it with the native apps, with the container
Yeah.
services. Databricks have container services. In Fabric, we have Fabric apps almost that we're working. We call them workloads, but they're much more integrated, right? Take an ISV workload or application and run it inside of Fabric in the experience. I think in the next few years, we're going to see more and more of that. And the reason why the data layer is consistent, right? The hyperscalers, we're solving the problem. There's not a lot of room for small startups to get into. The compute layer, you've got a variety of compute engines, right? Yeah, there'll be more companies coming in like DuckDB and others as well, and that's great. But that compute layer is fairly standard. The next layer is really the app layer, and that's where the innovation is going to come because if you want to serve your customers or your internal customers or your external customers very, very quickly, you want to iterate quickly and try different things, it's at the app layer, right? You're not going to do it at the infrastructure layer. It just takes way too much time and too much complexity. So we're kind of solving the data problem. We have plethora of different compute engines. Now it's the app layer. So how do you plug these
Yeah.
applications on top of that? And I think Fabric offers a uniquely differentiated way of doing that. We can talk about that separately. And then you have others as well, like Databricks and Snowflake as well. But AWS, Google aren't really doing much in that space, but I guarantee in the next year or so they will.
So my mind is literally racing because there's so many things I want to pick upon. Microsoft Fabric, I definitely want to dive deep into that topic. One thing that crossed my mind was I think the big problem, the gap that we still have is that you mentioned, the storage layer, there's a compute layer, app layer. Uh, at various levels, we see so much standardization. Storage, we came up with Parquet 15 years ago, and now with Iceberg, with SQL standards, we've got REST APIs, we've got at AI, we've got A2A, we've got MCP. The only place that never really came out with a standard is a metadata layer. Everybody does it. Every product needs to have metadata. Every metadata is bespoke to that product. So, any thoughts on what's going on in that, and why can we not have a common specification that everybody says this is the metadata? If you adhere to this spec, then any product that Iceberg REST
Yeah.
catalog. Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Go for it, Roy.
All
I've
right.
taken a few.
So I think metadata is a very wide term and it covers a lot of different things.
That is
From
true.
a table specific schemas and things like that, we've had a standard, right? In the Hive catalog,
Yeah.
it was a bit rigid, right? Now with the Iceberg catalog, we're kind of opening it and making it more of a standard, so more engines who don't necessarily understand the Hadoop space can actually interact with. So I think in that mode, we are going to see standards.
Hmm.
And we're already seeing with the Iceberg catalog, catalogs can talk to each other, multiple engines can understand each other, but that's in the scope of a table, right? Or
Yeah.
a set of
Technical,
tables.
technical metadata.
Exactly. The broader metadata, right? Metadata about tables, about other things.
Semantics.
It's
Yeah.
such a wide scope that
Right.
it's really hard to build a standard around. So there is open metadata standard, right? If you go to openmetadata.org, you can find
Yeah.
that standard, but it's so big that at the end of the day, like how do you use it? It's not really a standard at that point, right? Like anybody can add whatever they want. Just exchange it over JSON. So as long as you and I understand each other, it's good enough. So we've seen a lot of that metadata, operational metadata, additional information, industry standard, those kind of things fit into different catalogs because you just can't really. It's very hard to communicate that across engines, and also it's a differentiation for these vendors to say like that's the kind of metadata I hold and I store. I don't necessarily want to share it with you, right? Like if you want it, you have to go to my APIs to get it out, or I can give you a way to access it, but I don't want you to copy that to somewhere else because it's a little bit of a my moat, right? Or the thing that I hold. So you're not going to really see a lot of that. But and then on the
Yeah.
third one is access control and security
Yeah.
related metadata. And that's something that we're actively working in the Iceberg community to actually build a standard around that. And that's also difficult because there's different ways to represent policies and
Yeah.
different levels of policies. And how do you give the vendor control over their policies and allow them to differentiate? Because the second you standardize, you level set everybody, right? So how do vendors compete, right? How do I give a feature that's better than yours, right? And it's hard to do. But we are starting to standardize that because security and access control should really be standard. It shouldn't be something that vendors differentiate on.
But because
Differentiate on the layers above, right?
then I can access data wherever it exists consistently, and I don't even
Securely,
care
yeah.
whether it's on-prem or it's in cloud provider one or some of.
Exactly. So if you go to the Fabric data warehouse to query the data in OneLake or to query the data through a shortcut in OneLake 2S3, or to something else, it's the same security model, right? Sanjeev has certain access, and that's what he gets, right? It doesn't matter where the data resides. And then back to Deepti's point in the beginning of the conversation, right? Where data can actually be stored anywhere, that's sort of what our customers are saying. Like, yes, give me a way to access all the data, but it has to be secure. Right? I can't
And
have a certain policy
yeah.
here, but then the policy disappears when I go somewhere else.
So
And this is a really, really important point because we went from closed formats to open formats, right? And even that we started to standardize on table formats, not just file formats. And from table formats, we're now adding more and more layers on top, right? Where suddenly you might get into closing that access because in the name of security you're actually closing access, right? It doesn't become interoperable anymore just because you've added RLS CLS on it. And it's funny, just a couple of weeks ago at Wimbledon there was a board, and I actually took a picture of it because I thought of it. It said walled garden that way. Right.
wow.
I love that.
and and it's like this is the only kind of walled garden there should be, like an actual garden.
Yeah.
Yes.
Versus data being in walled gardens, because that's the next thing. You'll close it up just in the name of security, and that's where we want to go a step further. For Microsoft, it was a big deal to go from a closed format to open formats, not just one, two open formats. We're probably the only platform that so extensively supports both Delta and Iceberg. And now we want to push the boundaries on security to say, let's really have some approach to unify for security as well, to continue the interop, so that you don't end up where we were. And for us, for OneLake, we have OneLake security, which is at the lake level. And we had to solve the problems ourselves because guess what? We have 5 different engines. So
So
five
like
different
which ones? What engines do you have?
yeah, so great. I mean, I think this is a good time to really get into Fabric, and I will try to give an unbiased view, right? Because I'll say why. I think being in this space this long, I feel like I've learned on my own the mistakes that were made by the past that we're trying to fix. And so with Fabric, I mean, the vision, the foundation of it, it truly is very open, right? And so when you think about OneLake as the core of of that foundation, you have open formats, you have OneLake security. Now you build on top of that with multiple different engines. Power BI is probably the best well known, and that's where we started. We extended that architecture out to multiple engines. Power BI actually has AS is actually has an engine underneath that also now supports Delta, right, and can natively read Delta. So you don't even need a SQL engine in the middle. It's called direct late mode. Very, very powerful, reduces costs, more efficient for customers. But then you kind of go to your classics. So you have data integration, right, which is your pipelines, data flows. You have data warehouse, which is a disaggregated warehouse. Compute is completely disaggregated, also works on Delta Lake. You have Spark engine, which we call the SQL Lakehouse with a SQL endpoint. Of course, you can use Python and other things. And real-time intelligence, which has, of course, streams, Kafka compatible things, and Event House, which is more for events. It's a database, but with a language called KQL, also supports Delta. And so we had to work within our own teams to kind of figure out a common foundation, because these are different engines. They're optimized for different things. If you mess up one with a design principle, it's going to affect the other. So that's where you have to kind of come up with a common that common tier, which is OneLake. Now security is part of it. But if we can get this across the industry, it'll really be a game changer. We've done the hard work. It's taken years and years of work to get us there. But I think to not allow us as an industry in a market to go back to where we started, which is walled gardens, it's going to be important to have this. At least from a security auth perspective, a layer that's common at some open source thing. Yeah.
I'm curious, Roy. So Dipti has given this amazing vision, any compute engine fit for your use case. If it's time series, then use Event House. If it's graph, then maybe use Cosmos. If it's financial transactions, then you need a asset compliant SQL engine. So you got all of these engines. And then she said, Power BI, Direct Lake to Delta. What is happening at open table format? Like, can I write something natively in Iceberg in addition to Delta? And how will Power BI multiplex? Like, could I run a query, a dashboard that looks at my Iceberg tables and Delta? And then decides like how's the this interoperability between open table formats being achieved?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question. Now, Dipti talks about a lot of different engines. Not all the engines can support open table formats, but they will in the future, right? In the context of analytics, Power BI, Spark, data warehousing, they do work off of both of those. They can work both off of both of those formats. And the way that we handle this today is through this OneLake, right? So if you think about storage, right? You sort of have blob store, you have ADLS, which is, let's just call it a naming scheme on top of a blob store, and then you have OneLake. And OneLake is a storage SaaS layer. That's kind of how I typically explain it, where it provides that interoperability built in. So when the user or when an engine makes an API call, get table, get object, get file, whatever the API call is, the OneLake layer is the one that handles how the data should be retrieved. Now, behind the scenes, if you already have an Iceberg table, OneLake automatically converts it to Delta. If you have Delta, converts it to Iceberg, and it works with our mirroring solutions, our shortcut solutions. So when you bring data from outside, we can also do the same conversion. So engines don't necessarily need to know what format is under the cover. If they support Delta, we'll hand them Delta. If they support Iceberg, we'll hand them Iceberg. And that's the beauty of this OneLake service, right? So as you layer that capability on top, you can do a lot of smart things to interoperate without bubbling the context up to the application layer or the user layer. Now,
And going to the open source aspect, we were talking earlier about how important it is. This conversion, this translation is actually done using Xtable, which is Apache Xtable. It's an open source, project that we gave back to and, founded along with many others. But again, it's important for customers. The goal here was that for customers, they shouldn't have to decide, right? Because as I work with large customers, what we're seeing is some parts may have Snowflake, some parts may have Databricks, some parts they want to standardize for AI with Fabric, and that's going to grow. And so they, typically they would start with OneLake and might need both, right? Both flavors, and they shouldn't have to decide. Right? They shouldn't have to decide which one at any point in time. It should just work seamlessly out of the box.
I agree.
So let's move to a layer above open table format. So open table formats have done an amazing job at the table level, the table abstraction on top of Delta, Parquet files, or other kinds of low level. Now, if I'm going to use applications, which we've been talking quite a bit about how that's such an important layer, and I'm going to use natural interface, how am I going to translate what the business people are asking out of data? What is that business metadata layer? How's Microsoft Fabric and other similar products helping create that business semantic layer?
Yeah, do you want to take a pass at it?
Sure, I can go for it. So it's a very important question, right? At the end of the day, business outcomes are what customers are looking for. And for us, it goes all the way down to even Office, right? We have MIP labels, right? Like confidentiality, all of these things that all need to sort of be maintained. That is the beauty of a consolidated coalesced stack going from AI Foundry to Fabric to our infra, and then on the top end all the way down to Office and whether it's Excel or whatever that downstream app might be. And when you label it, it stays through and through all the way in. And you get that straight out of the box, right? So from a Fabric perspective and a Microsoft perspective, this is hugely important for customers because that's what they expect, right? That's literally what they expect. Now, in terms of accessing this data, there's again a range. I mean, we've talked about the most standard engines, structured engines, etc., right? But increasingly, it's moving to models, agents, and so on. And so here, for example, we have data agents in Fabric. Even our RTI, so real-time intelligence, etc., now have MCP endpoints so that you can actually have an agent query directly on with KQL, etc. And all of this while maintaining that business metadata and only giving you access to data that you have access to. So very, very powerful stack, which is in some ways, and we have, we haven't talked about Purview, but Purview is like catalog of catalogs. So it gives you that overarching governance, across everything, whether it's Fabric, maybe other engines, might give you more things like lineage, etc., that you need. So business metadata is something that I would say, even personally, over the last 20 years, semantics, whether it's a semantic model, whether it's that understanding of the domains, etc. This has been a huge shift, right? It's become even more important because the agent needs to know what it is. And so customers are increasingly starting to say, okay, how do I get to that semantic layer so that everything can operate on top of that? That's where we're heading to, and that's kind of, the future as I see it.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah,
you
I,
see?
I agree 100%. I think without that layer, you're gonna have to do a lot of annotations and
Hmm.
explanations and gonna help engines. And now with AI, we can actually do a lot of this. And we actually have a few partners on Fabric today who do something very similar to do entity resolutions. And they take a lot of data sets and they create these abstraction layers for agents specifically. And I think that's the kind of one of the touch back to the power of running these applications on top of your data stack, in this case Fabric, is that you can augment it with these additional capabilities to make usage easier. But I think that semantic layers is a critical piece to agents, users as well, but I think they benefit from it in a slower scale as opposed to agents that I can throw hundreds and thousands of agents at it, and the impact is much, much bigger. So yeah, like,
Yeah.
like Dipti said, everything yeah.
So we'll
Yeah.
get to agents and talk more about it, but just talking about
We got to
semantic
get to
layer.
agents sooner than that. Come on.
So the semantic layer is such a conundrum because I see Power BI has one, Tableau, so the
Yeah.
BI tools have semantic layers. Snowflake introduced it at the database level, where you can create metrics. When you create your schema, you can define your formulas and stuff like that. When we went to Databricks Summit, they announced it in Unity Catalog. So
Mhm.
Unity Catalog Metrics was announced. How is Microsoft Fabric doing it? Because you can also do it standalone. You can have at scale or cube.dev.
Yep.
So there are many different places, and each one has its own trade-off. Whether you embed it at the data level, at the catalog level, standalone, BI level, they all serve different purposes. How is Microsoft Fabric tackling this existence of metadata semantic layer?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about it. It's an hour-long episode, so we should give you the right experts, Sanjeev, to do an episode on just
Just
that.
a
Because
cement.
honestly, it's
Yes.
evolving. It's evolving very, very fast
Okay.
with kind of this chat with your data, right?
Yeah.
Chat with your data, semantic, where you really need that semantic layer. So yes, absolutely. Power BI has a that semantic layer. Which is what it can query on. We have metrics, we have a range of different capabilities. And in all honesty, I'm not the best expert to talk about it. But because of this layer, what it's enabled us to do at scale is to have Copilot interface with it because it operates on top of your models, right? And give you answers. Maybe build a dashboard. Maybe do a drill down into your sales revenue or your sales forecast very very effectively using NLP, which was very very hard to do in the past, right? You would, what was the model you had? We went to from moving data from OLTP to Hadoop or DW, old scale. Then we said, oh, we should have a medallion architecture. Then we said we should have, this gold tier, which is what is going to serve, and that's what you use run your BI on top of. And then you had a semantic layer on top of that. But really now you want it across much more widely across all your data so that any agent, any copilot can query, right? Using, of course, LLMs, SLMs, whatever that might be. Might be a custom agent, a custom model, which we're hearing more and more of. Customers want their own custom models, which are fine-tuned for their data, their domain, their industry, right? And so that's what this solves for. Now, whichever tier you operate on, there's different approaches, right, to your specific question. I think at the end of the day, a customer doesn't really care what exact tier it's on, as long as they get that same insight across their data estate. The tiers below that,
I
the
agree.
virtualization tier, are actually
Yeah.
more important because guess what? If your data is sitting in S3 or GCP, you don't have access to it in this semantic model. So that becomes more important. And so I would say three things. One is full view of your data estate, really important in this, right? So you start there. Then you need open format so that any agent, custom agent model can operate. So that's important. You build your semantic layer on top of it so that either, whether it's Microsoft Copilots or custom Copilots or, whether you use Llama or Phi or whatever other models can operate. On top, and that's where we're headed in the future. And then eventually it'll just be MCP, where it's not even a human, it's agent chatting with agent, trying to get access to this data. And to Roy's earlier point, we were using it was human use. And imagine when it becomes machine use, right? It's a factor of 100 that the efficiency grows by, the insights grow by. The question is, can organizations actually get there and make use of it? Right.
Yeah. And just to add to everything that Deepti just said, like ultimately, like, what is a semantic layer? Like, it's basically taking your data, your raw data, and building or interpreting it in a way that makes sense, right? For the business, for the user. So in many cases, semantic layer is really just defining metrics, right? Metrics and dimensions, and how do you slice and dice
Yeah.
your data to report back, number of active users or number of paying customers or ARR or whatever. So it's a business representation of your raw data. So do you need a semantic layer? Like, what is a layer? Like, not necessarily. I mean, that context can be in different places. Now, I will say that in the past, that context have lived in BI tools, right? Inside of Tableau, inside of these systems. Now, if you want to move from one tool to the other, the business context goes away, right? So
Yeah.
you see the adoption of dbt to build these
Yep.
semantic
Yeah.
models that are basically just transformations of the data in a proper representation. So it's coded or maintained outside of the BI layer or the data warehouse layer in a version controlled model. But just like we're doing with data and metadata, to your earlier question, right? That semantic understanding, that the mapping gets extracted as well from these compute engines in a more standard way. Like in Fabric, we have a way to store it. Other systems will probably have a similar way, like in Databricks and in Snowflake. But at the end of the day, those semantic meaning translate into some SQL query, right? You have to do a join, you have to do an aggregation of something, right? Of some tables. And as Deepti said, like if those tables and that data isn't in open table formats, in your lake, accessible, then your semantic model can easily break, right? Because what if you need to join a data set from OneLake with a data set in S3, for example? Well, we can represent it inside of OneLake as a shortcut, right? As a table. Now you can build a semantic model. Otherwise, you couldn't. How can your query engine go to two different clouds and not have to pay, exorbitant amount of money? So everything you guys already said, right? Semantic layer makes a lot of sense. Much more meaningful, I think, for For users, I think it's to be determined if it's meaningful for agents, right? Because today agents operate like users. So like when I write an agent, like, well, if I need semantic layers, so does the agent, but maybe the agent doesn't, right? Because the agent can actually look at the data and make the right correlations to know, oh, that's how you represent a user. That's how you represent an ARR, right? So maybe you don't need that. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes.
Let's pivot to agents. I'm curious. One of the big issues people have with agents is how do I know I'm getting a good ROI? What is your experience? And I want to like get a bit deeper into how do your users create agents in Microsoft Fabric? Are those agents doing text to SQL? What kind of ROI, what use cases are you starting to see emerge from agentic architecture?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Microsoft is, the leader in this space in in some ways, right? The overall arching sort of AI and data space. And what we're seeing is there's an entire AI stack. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface of our AI stack. We've been talking about, data and fabric. AI Foundry is really kind of where you can build. You can pick your models. You can have a catalog, very very wide catalog within Microsoft, and all kinds of models, open source and others. You can build your own custom models as well. You have Copilot Studio in addition of, and of course you have GitHub Copilot, which is coding and dev, and VS Code is kind of integrated into that massive usage, right, that we're seeing. So it depends on what kind of use cases the customers want to get to, right? I typically put them in three buckets of AI investments in terms of, as I talk with customers, it helps them with a framework. One is just your internal efficiencies, right? For your internal efficiencies, you could use like Fabric Copilot, everything as a Copilot, right? So you have to start to, use get to whether it's M365 Copilot or, others, that's kind of that bucket. Then you have your features. So if you're actually a product, a software service, you want to add AI features, agents, agentic stuff to that. That's where the second bucket is going into. And then the third is completely custom, right? Customized for the industry, the domain, for their data. It could be internal, it could be externally sold. That ends up is going to be IP in the future because that's kind of how insights will be driven. That's kind of the new engine, if you will, right, for your data. So across these three buckets, if you we're seeing it's a spectrum. I think there's a lot of iteration that's going on where customers are trying to build their agents. They're starting off with data agents in Fabric for data. We now have things like providing very specific instructions to the agent on the responses that it provides. So you can basically prompt engineer a much more so that so it gives the right answers. And then these skills, if you will, can get plugged into AI Foundry into your core agent that's actually there, right? So it's a fully integrated stack end to end from AI Foundry to Fabric that you can customize. But in addition to that, you also have OneLake tier that can be integrated into Foundry directly for your data for any other agent, or AI search for that matter, for vector indexing, right? In fact, it has hybrid search, so you can do vector based or keyword based, and a ranked version of those two. So there's many different paths. Typically, I ask our customers the question, what is your outcome? What are you trying to do? Is this internal? Is it external? Do you want to commercialize it? And based on that, there are different paths that might make sense. It also depends on what the agent actually is for. I mean, it might just be CI/CD, right? Doing deployment, and it's very different versus chatting with your data and using that. So yeah, it's
Right.
quite a
Yeah,
spectrum.
thank you. No, that's great, Roy. Have you I'm very curious to see is there a use that surprised you? Like a customer used Microsoft Fabric with agents in an innovative way that was a game changer.
There's many things that surprise Roy, right? No.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Honestly, I think, well, let me say this before I get to Fabric. Within Microsoft, as a team, I see a ton of use of Copilot and AI. It's just
It's in
staggering
everywhere.
just how much it's in the system. Engineers are using it, product people, leadership.
Wow.
We use it for everything, which is really cool, right? You gotta use it, and it's pretty effective. So that definitely surprised me. I think on a Fabric side, nothing really like surprised me, but I think where you see it used a lot is to sort of automate things, to automate tasks that you previously had to do and required a lot of hand holding and touching to be able to do. Like we talked about semantics layer earlier, right? So there's a partner that we're working with right now that's building a workload on top of Fabric to do entity resolution and entity mapping, and
Hmm.
basically takes all your sources, maps it to Iceberg tables in the lake, and then creates this semantic layer. And then the next piece of their product is an agent, right? So now users can actually click, drag and drop, create business agents that are tied to that semantic layer, right? So now the user doesn't have to create a pipeline for loading data and transforming it, a pipeline for building semantic models. It's all like literally 2 clicks, and the
Yeah.
thing just works. And then you start building agents. Now, the thing that was interesting to me about that particular example is that they took it a step further and they said, "Hey, this is not just a generic agent building thing. Like we're going to actually box you into an industry." So they said like, "Hey, there's a manufacturing industry or a retail or a marketing." And they build these guardrails around each of those verticals to say when you build an agent for marketing, this is the context that you need. So they enrich the data with additional information and they put guardrails in place. So you're not just building generic stuff that may or may not work. You're working inside of, like, sorry for the lack of a better term, like a walled garden for marketing that will drive more value for those agents. Now, at the end of the day, a user is building an agent. If they build it for the wrong problem, you may not get the right answer, right? You may not get the right solution, but at least it puts you in a confined area so you're not, your brain is not scattered everywhere. So I've seen that being more effective, and I think there'll be more and more of that in the future as an industry kind of figure out where is the strength and the weaknesses of these agents, and
Yeah.
ultimately give them time to mature and to get better. But we're going to start by compressing and putting them into buckets that are easier to manage and easier to get ROI, because right now it's a wild west, right? Everybody's brains running crazy, everybody's experimenting and trying, and I think that's awesome. That's how we learn, right?
I
So you're
have
going to see
seen,
excitement and you're going to see
yeah,
a tank as
yeah.
we figure out, all right, what's the reality of this? And then it's going to come back up again. So we're,
I
we're in
am
the early days. We're in the
I'm
70s of
seeing,
the internet.
yeah, these amazing usage of MCP server embedded in the database and using ChatGPT or Cloud Code or some front end. People are saying they're asking all kinds of business questions, but
Yeah,
they can even say, okay, now that you can connect to my schema, draw me the entity relationship diagram.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
goes, looks at primary key, foreign keys, and it comes out with this perfect ERD.
yeah,
And so all the stuff that my start of my career manually did to
yeah,
fine tune and fix problems. Now it's just literally you can talk to
yeah.
the data.
Yeah, I'll
And
tell you a
Sanjeev,
couple
we're
of
going
examples.
back to the where we
Yeah,
started, where I said, the data platform teams are going to become smaller. This is
Yeah.
exactly why the kind of
Wow.
efficiencies that we're seeing it drive. I mean, even like as Roy said, internally we have an AI first team, for my engineering teams. The kind of efficiencies that we're seeing, in drive is phenomenal. And so just to be a part of that and drive that change, honestly, is an exciting. It's like being yeah, never a dull day, as I was saying
Yeah.
earlier.
So talking about never a dull day. So before we end this, Dipti, what's on your roadmap that you can publicly talk about that's exciting? And then Roy, same question for you.
Well, if I told you, no.
You have to kill me. You'll have to kill all the
Honestly,
people who
this
are
was
watching
one of the
this.
things that surprised me when I started is a completely public open roadmap. So if you go to
Yeah.
roadmap.fabric.microsoft.com, you
Hmm.
will see it may not be 100% accurate, PMs are, behind or ahead. But you will literally see every investment area in every space, the data integration, data engineering, and so on and so forth. I would say, the big ones for us continue to be quality and security.
Hmm.
As Microsoft, we have to pay, we have the bar is very, very high. And with the phenomenal momentum that Fabric has, and the adoption that we're seeing, we have to invest in it, now. We continue to listen, to what Roy was saying earlier. We are like a startup. We learn. I mean, the leadership is phenomenal in terms of actually listening to our MVPs, our actual Reddit, whatever that community is really trying to listen and saying, okay, what can we do better? What can we fix? Okay, this moves later because features can wait. Quality, security, really key, right?
Hmm.
And that's, I mean, we are running mission critical. London Stock Exchange Group, Epic, right? Kantar. These are big kind of customers, and we have to stay on top of it. So a large chunk actually of our investment goes into these areas, whether it's private links, granular, very fine grained private links, or things like that. The other thing that is actually exciting is the data agent side. I think that is going to just
Hmm.
continue to grow and evolve. Very, very exciting area. In particular, we're going to start to have data agents work with mirror databases. Right. So now it's not only Fabric data in OneLake, but it's anything that's mirrored in. That might be Databricks, that might be SQL, Cosmos, etc. All of that you can just use it as a skill in your agent, right? So very exciting. The workloads. We didn't really touch on this, but Fabric is truly an open platform. You can build workloads. Maybe Roy can touch a little bit about. We are doing some cool stuff there. And Yeah, but yeah, take a look at the roadmap, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If you have questions, you know how to reach us. It's public internet.
Yeah, amazing. I had no idea it was a public roadmap. Roy, you're on mute.
Sorry, I
Everything
mean,
I
I was
said.
talking to myself. Everything Dipti said. I think two big areas, right? For me, I think the first one is just interoperability. Right? Something that we're doing with the OneLake ecosystem and open table formats. We talked about catalog interoperability. We talked about access control security interoperability. When we're doing all of this in the open source, right? So again, nothing secret. It's all there in the open. People should come in and contribute. I think that's going to be the biggest piece. Open tables have sold for many years that multi-engine access, read, write, interoperability. Like we're delivering on this. So I think this is really exciting area. And as Dipti said, right, the workload on side of Fabric, I called in the beginning Fabric apps,
Hmm.
but that's in my opinion for the next couple of years. That's where a lot of the excitement and innovation will come because it's not just from Microsoft; it's from all of our partners right now. They're running full speed ahead with access to all the customer data that they work with, all these tools like data agents, fabric engines, et cetera, all there. They don't need to mess with infrastructure. They don't need to know any of the optimizations. It's all done for them. So the focus is really about building some really awesome capabilities on top of this foundation. And I think that's where I don't have a roadmap for that, but I think that's really the exciting part.
But that's a
And
vision. Yeah.
FabCon, we're doing a FabCon in Vienna in September
Oh, wow.
14th. We'll make some announcements there. If you're there, we'd love to have you. If not, your listeners should definitely follow along or even join us.
This will be super exciting. I have to say, this like Dipti to parrot you. There's never a dull day. Just last week, we saw even at S3 level, they have vector support now, which
Yes,
is really pushing down this capability at the lowest level, at the storage level. So I'm sure Microsoft Fabric, bunch of new announcements will come out in September in Vienna. Cannot wait for that. So
absolutely.
with that,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
This was a blast.
Such a pleasure. Always, I learned so much from you guys, and I'm super enthused about all the new stuff. It seems like we are literally at an inflection point. This is when things are finally starting to come together after decades and decades of doing very specialized work in different areas. Now it's all coming together for the business benefit,
That's right.
not
Right.
That's right.
for technology benefit. So.
Yeah. There's always going to be noise in a market. You have to tune it out and kind of focus on where the world is going. How do we
Yeah.
add value? And I think this is it. So looking
Thank,
forward to more conversations, but thank you for having us. Appreciate
thank
it,
you so
Tanvi.
much. Take care. Have a
Thanks so
nice
much,
day.
All right,
See
you
you.
Harvey.
too.
Bye.
Take care.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.